What up, hockey fans? It is your favorite Latinos coming to you directly after the Florida Panthers at Seattle Kraken game. My name is Erica Ayala. I am your host of Locked On Kraken. I am joined by Armando Velez, your host of Locked On Panthers, and we are going to break down the Seattle Kraken for you coming up on this episode of Locked On Panthers, Locked On Kraken crossover episode.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Armando, what's going on, homie? The Seattle Kraken, we just need to play the Florida Panthers every night.
Sometimes this game doesn't make sense. I'll tell you one thing, that the Panthers have had a dream season. That's the best way that I could say it. A dream season after building off a foundational season last year with getting second place in the division, getting home ice against Tampa Bay, and even though they unfortunately lost in round one against Tampa Bay, and all the offseason acquisitions that they got, the start that they had, and then the whole start that they had at home, winning 11 to start and tying the all-time record for wins to start at home. And then Seattle comes in, Chris Driedger comes in and only allows one goal against the Panthers, which I happened to be in person for that one. And then the streak is over for the Panthers against the expansion Kraken team, who many thought were going to be middle of the pack, but then the start that they had, these games were not easy outs for the Panthers, that's for sure. They didn't do it at home last time around, and then of course they didn't do it this time around. Different circumstances with Chris Driedger being placed in COVID protocol, so they weren't gonna face Chris Driedger at all in this one. So Chris Driedger, he is in COVID protocol, and he was unable to play in this one. And then Philip Grubauer comes in, and he only allows one goal. So in two games, Philip Grubauer lets up three, but total 4 goals in these 2 games. And then the Florida Panthers, they just in both of these games, they just allowed too many odd man rushes the other way, and in both games they just couldn't figure out the Kraken, and it's just it's a little frustrating. So once again, this game doesn't make sense sometimes.
It really is wild, coming in, and I was mentioning to you, while we were off air, that I have another crossover, or as I like to say, squadcast coming up with Ann Kimmel. And we were talking about, okay, well, what are these two teams going to look like matched up? And one of the things that Ann was saying is, well, if any team, but in this case, obviously Seattle, can be successful on the odd man rushes, then that might be a way to kind of thwart everything that Nashville was doing. And I had said in that podcast, I was like, well, Seattle, we're not necessarily known for getting our own rushes. We definitely give up a bunch of rushes, but it's few and far between that you see the Seattle Kraken able to really push ahead with numbers. But to your point, that was happening a little bit more tonight, and it made the difference in the game. There was a little bit more tenacity on the puck and going to find the puck for the Seattle Kraken, which is something that, to your point, this is a team on paper that we were expecting to see middle of the pack. But one of the reasons that I would argue that they have not been that, Armando, is because they haven't been able to have that consistency. And it was really just a battle of which team was going to take advantage. And I think when it was all said and done, it's going to be Mason Appleton's goal that is considered the game-winning goal. Calle Yarncrook scored on an empty netter, but I think it's the Mason Appleton goal. It was one of those where it was plenty of passes up the ice, and Mason was just able to find that slither of space where Florida kind of crept in and were sneaking over to the near post. And as soon as Vince Dunn saw that, he shuffled the puck over to Appleton, who shot it right away. And that is the type of Seattle hockey that you love to see, but unfortunately we don't see very often. So whatever it is about the Panthers, I don't know. I don't know if this means that we have a budding rivalry, but at least for now, the Seattle Kraken certainly needed a win in so many ways. The playoffs are well out of reach for us, but just to figure out once again how to reestablish this franchise, I think this was a critical win for the Seattle.
And even though they don't face the Panthers again this season, it's a little bit of something they could look back on when they say, oh, this is a team they faced twice, one of the top teams in the NHL, and saying, hey, this is a team that we had a little bit of confidence against this season, and it was a growing something of growth for this Seattle Kraken team, that they say, hey, we matched up against these guys and we were able to beat them, and say, hey, that's something great to look back on. And it's this game had two weird goals. The first one with Duclair that bounced off a Kraken skate, and then the third one by the Seattle Kraken, it was credited to Blackwell.
Yeah.
That was bounce all over the place, and then it looked like that his hand touched the puck in a forward motion, but then it just bounced off of his head and then into the goal. I'm like, okay, this game's officially drunk. So it was especially because that was a goal that was scored very quickly after the second. So it was like it rains, it pours for the Florida Panthers in that situation.
Yeah, that was definitely a wild goal. And then he ends up like falling backwards. There was a stick that was out still, and he like falls over the stick, and so is like celebrating on the ice. But yeah, a wild play. And then you mentioned those two quick goals. I think it was like in 17 seconds of each other or something like that, which is a Seattle Kraken first. We're always talking about our first over here, but it was Yanni Gourde who scored that second goal in the second period for the Seattle Kraken, and then Blackwell right after him. That was Blackwell's fourth goal of the season. But I think what you see there, and it was a gritty, dirty kind of goal for Colin Blackwell. Again, not something that the Seattle Kraken do very often. And yeah, totally bounced right off of his head, which was hilarious. Whereas the Yanni Gourde goal was a snipe. That was a skilled goal for sure. So you saw a little bit of everything from the Seattle Kraken, including, though, that they gave up two goals after that. So you didn't get all of them back in the second frame, but almost nearly did. And, we end the second period all tied up after the Seattle Kraken did a great job to pull ahead there. So, at that point in time, what were you seeing from Florida where you were able to equalize the score?
It's funny because before I do that goal to make it 2-1 was a little. It was kind of heartbreaking in a way that, remember, the Seattle Kraken had a 5-on-3 at one point. They had a full 59 seconds, almost a full minute of 5-on-3. The Florida Panthers were able to kill it, and then the one thing that happened was after they killed off the penalty, they just couldn't clear the zone, and then that's when the Seattle Kraken took advantage. It's like, even though it's not a power play goal, emotionally it counts. Emotionally, I feel like it counts as one, even though it's not, because they just weren't able to get situated and get the puck out of the zone, get their line change that they needed to, and regroup. So that was just a really tough one for the Panthers. But hey, the two goals shortly after, which were just less than a minute 30 apart, was just Huberdeau and Barkov just being themselves. And of course, it all started with the power play. Owen Tippett drawing that slashing penalty as well. Owen Tippett using his speed to create right in front of the net to create that slash. And it was on a rush. That's what it was. So a lot of things happen in this game due to rushes on both sides. Seattle just had more rushes, but the two goals for the Panthers were on 3 shots. So it's 2 goals on 3 shots, just 2 superstars just going back and forth. And then there was a big part of the game when Jonathan Huberdeau and Alexander Barkov have been on separate lines for most of the season. But there was this one, Andrew Burnett, of course, with them being down, they kept them together for a big portion of this game, and including one of the power plays as well, where it was half of power play 2 and half of power play 1 together, where Huberdeau and Barkov were just not going to go off the ice. They didn't score a power play goal on I think it was like late in the second period, but the Panthers, those 2 guys were just not going to come off the ice. So it was just those 2 superstars just learning how to take over, and they have scored in spurts a lot of times this season, and they just said, "Hey, we're going to take this over." But unfortunately, it didn't bring them to victory.
Yeah, indeed. And I do want to get into a little bit more of the stats and facts that we saw from this game. But first, we're going to talk about our great sponsors in Built Bar. And they want you to know that it's a new year. So that means New Year's resolutions. And if yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, you got to make sure you include Built Bar into the equation. That's because Built Bar makes it easy to stick to your resolution. And that is by grabbing a protein bar that tastes as good as a candy bar and maybe even better. I don't know about you, Armando, but I love the double chocolate. That's my go-to when it comes to Built Bar. They also had that cookie dough chunk flavor for a little while, which was just like, oh, so good, so good. But all of the Built Bars, regardless of your particular flavor, they come at about 130 calories all in, including that they are covered in chocolate, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. So whether it's you're getting your day started or you're grabbing a snack on the go or at your office when you're recording a bunch of podcasts, Built Bar is the way to go. And so we over at Locked On want to make sure that you are living your best 2022. And so if you use promo code LOCKED15 over at Built.com, you will get 15% off your next order of the delicious Built Bars of your particular choice. You can do a mix box, you can go with one flavor, whatever you want. Anything that you go get over at Built.com, when you use promo code LOCKED15, you will save 15% on your next order. As I like to say, happy snacking.
And we are back here on this crossover edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers and the Locked On Seattle Kraken podcast. And one difference that the Seattle Kraken really made in this one, you were talking about you wanted to go by the numbers, but look at the blocks for this one. 25-13 in favor of Seattle. And Grubauer was amazing. He there's towards the end of the game when the Florida Panthers pulled Sergei Bobrovsky, Aaron Ekblad had 3 chances right at the net.
Wild.
And many there's a lot of bodies in front of the net along with Grubauer making saves. Duclair had a great opportunity, and Grubauer had the left leg out too as well. 28 of 31 for Philip Grubauer. This was the prized goalie free agent that they signed away from the Colorado Avalanche just this summer. A deal that Seattle wasn't expecting to get neither, because they signed Driedger. So the even though you said it, they're out of the playoffs this year, but still a building piece with these two goalies going forward, and the block discrepancy also says a lot about it. When we met this summer and we had our crossover, we talked a little bit about how the Kraken were made to be a little bit of a defensive team. Early on, they were giving up a lot of goals. They were looking the exact opposite of that defensive team. But they, at least for the two games that they faced against the Panthers, it's definitely looked that it definitely looks like that they're that defensive team that Ron Francis and Dave Hextall want to create in Seattle.
Well, I love that you mentioned that because I talk about this a lot on Locked On Kraken, and that is because you're absolutely right. We talked about on paper that this was supposed to be a defensive-minded team. That being said, a lot of the growing pains from my vantage point about the Seattle Kraken team have been on the defensive side. And I also love that you talked about Philip Grubauer because we talk a lot on the Locked On Kraken show that Philip Grubauer sometimes seems out of sync with the Seattle Kraken team, particularly when we see the Seattle Kraken team not putting up the numbers that we're seeing in the game that just closed out against Florida. When the Seattle Kraken play a great team defense and they are showing their goaltender, particularly if that goaltender is Philip Grubauer, that they are going to sacrifice the body, that they are going to put in a great team defense effort. I do believe that Grubauer plays better in that sense. So I felt that coming into any of the games that we have, you had to see the Seattle Kraken defense really buckle down and show that they are committed to stopping pucks before they even get to Philip Grubauer. Now, some of the goals that we did see come through, you saw some come through on a screen. Gruby just didn't get a good look on that. That's hockey. That's going to happen. But there have been times where, quite honestly, the Seattle Kraken goaltender has been left out to dry. And so I like that you mentioned the blocks because that is definitely a stat I look at a lot. And you're absolutely right. We signed Philip Grubauer. We've got him for another 5 seasons, I believe, after this one. So, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of investment for us to have a goaltender that at times seems, again, a little bit out of sync. So games like this are going to be critically important. Unfortunately, again, Grubauer is putting up the grunt of the workload, which was not expected, to your point, when we knew we were getting Grubauer alongside Driedger. We were hoping to get a little bit more of an equitable share there. Unfortunately, Chris Driedger, he'll have 2 or 3 great starts, and then he's gone on the injured reserve twice and now is in COVID protocol. So although the season is basically a foregone conclusion, we're not making the playoffs. I was hoping we'd see more Driedger because I do think he's earned more starts. Unfortunately, he finds himself unavailable yet again for the Seattle Kraken team, which is just really tough luck for Driedger. But the energy when Driedger is in net versus Grubauer is different, at least to my eye test. So hopefully, once Driedger is out of COVID protocol, hopefully he can stay healthy the rest of the way, because if I were the Seattle Kraken, I'd actually give him some more starts and let Gruby get a little bit more rest because he hasn't been able to do that a lot this season.
Mm-hmm. And it's a big workload for your goalie when they're going out there. And both goalies for the Panthers, from the Panthers' perspective, have had their fair share of going a big stretch of starting. Like in November, Spencer Knight had a big amount of starts without, at the time, Christopher Gibson coming in November. Now they get Jonas Johansson off of waivers. Spencer Knight goes into COVID protocol, and then Bob has to start a few games. And also, Spencer Knight hasn't necessarily played well this season overall, but he was able. He got into the game against Calgary in the first game of the road trip, and then gets in the game against Vancouver, and then picks up a win for the Panthers. So there's a little bit of a confidence booster for both goalies, because Bob got his first shutout in Edmonton for the first time in like 26 months since November of 2019. So that's a little bit of encouraging. But this one was not the best support for Sergei Bobrovsky, as the odd man rushes were just a little too much for him. And you talked about screens and not seeing pucks. That's hockey. I mean, that's what happened on the power play goal from Huberdeau. Barkov had an opportunity right at the net. The great thing about that goal was the Panthers were still able to retrieve the puck, work it around, and keep the Seattle Kraken on their toes, not getting them set. So by the time that Hubie launched the puck, it was behind the net, and Grubauer just wasn't able to react on that one. And that is just that just shows that a team is like not willing to like stay still and just like continue to just move it around, continue to have those heads moving one way or the other, so they can't shift to the other side and they can't read where the shot is going. So that's the work in progress that's continuing with this Panthers power play, that which has been so much better in this last, like, ever since the COVID pause ended, really, for the Panthers. Their power play has just been so much better. And it's weird to think you get a power play goal in this one and you don't allow the Seattle Kraken to get a power play goal yourselves, but then the even strength has been their best part of their game all season. And this is one of the rare times where even strength let the Florida Panthers down.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild to see. Like you mentioned, a drought on the power play for the Seattle Kraken. That's more or less par for the course. But I like what you said about the Panthers and just being aggressive and essentially having a net front presence. Well, that goal by Yanni Gourde, while it was a clinical strike by Gourde, which we know he's capable of, another thing that you'll see is that Ryan Donato and I believe it was Vince Dunn were putting in work in front, and they were agitating the defenders on goal to the done. Even after, if you look at the playback, he's poking around. I didn't catch the number of the defender for the Florida Panthers, but he is kind of like, we got that one, because he was being harassed in front because he was a net front presence. You saw Ryan Donato. I'm pretty sure he didn't get his stick on that Yanni Gourde goal. I think it was a Yanni Gourde goal straight up, and I think that was the right call. But Donato was right there, so that's something that we weren't seeing from the Seattle Kraken team. So net front presence, we're not a really big and tall forward core, but being aggressive goes a really long way in the National Hockey League.
Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about this off camera, and gonna read this on the show about goal differential for both of these teams heading into this game. Florida's second in goal differential in the third period, and while Seattle's 29th. And the fact that the go ahead goal, with the game winning goal, happened 30 seconds in, it at the time I was thinking, okay, you let one. There's 19 minutes and 30 seconds left, while you have one of the teams that have the worst goal differential against teams that have one of the best. No problem. I'm not worried. I said that at the time, but of course, sometimes you just gotta let the game play out. And of course, it was a game unlike the Panthers that we've seen, that they didn't make their third period comeback, which they're third in the league in third period comebacks in the entire NHL with 12.
Yeah, and as far as the Seattle Kraken, you see in the third frame that they get, like you mentioned, that early goal, Mason Appleton. Calle Jarnkrok gets a, and I said this off air, I think, as well. I'm used to us seeing, and we see empty net goals in Seattle Kraken games all the time, but usually it's the opponent scoring. But we got an empty netter here. Calle Jarnkrok, unassisted, was able to essentially just walk that one in. Again, there was a breakaway that the Seattle Kraken were able to take advantage of. And so I think the Seattle team, I would love to say this is the start of something. Unfortunately, we've seen those starts and stops a few times. But to your point earlier, if they can just hone in on what this felt like and remember what it feels like to be blocking shots, to be getting their own odd man rushes and whatnot, this is definitely something that can be a building block. How sustainable it is, we'll see with this win over Florida. And we have Nashville coming up, who we also got a win, not just any win, but we got our first ever win against Nashville. So we're hoping, luck will strike again once they come up to Climate Pledge Arena.
And that win for the Seattle Kraken puts them at 13-24-4 for the season. We're going to continue this conversation next, but first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code Locked On to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we're back here in this third and final segment of this Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Seattle Kraken podcast. Just named the records for the Seattle Kraken before the commercial break. For the Florida Panthers, this loss drops them to 28-9-5 on the season. Still leads the Atlantic, second in the NHL in points percentage. Third now, behind Carolina in points percentage and behind Colorado. So not much to complain for the Florida Panthers. But one thing I want to ask you, how has, from your vantage point, from the trips you have made to Seattle and by the interactions you've made on the internet, how is the reception based on this team, regardless of wins and losses?
Well, I think that the buzz for who are going to be the diehard fans is still pretty high. The Seattle Kraken as a franchise are finding ways to inject some energy into the franchise at every turn, whether it's a new, opening display, and we have what they call the twins. So it's not one centered jumbotron, but it's two jumbotrons on either side of Climate Pledge Arena, and they've introduced a new opening kind of act, so to speak. And word on the street is that that's just kind of the baseline, and that there will be other elements added over time. So that's one thing. There's a doggo. We've got a pup officially now, Davy Jones, which of course playing with the whole nautical and deep, Fear the Deep theme that we have. So I think that the franchise has been doing a really great job of engaging everyone from casual fans who are just going to be loyal because they are Seattleites or they just like the colors or whatever the case is. And then you have, of course, your diehard fans that are still going to Climate Pledge Arena. Every night, it's a potential to see a first because we're a brand new franchise. And I kind of joked around, even in this podcast, that that's something that definitely comes from the Seattle Kraken. We're having fun. Things on the ice are not looking the way that we always want it to look. But that being said, there's still a lot of buzz, still a lot of energy around this franchise, even despite some of the challenges, including losing Brandon Tanev to the season with an ACL injury. We've got Jaden Schwartz out. Jamie Alexiak just went on the IR with a lower body injury. Carson Soucy in this game. So we were playing this game with 5 defenders for a while there. As far as I can tell, and from everything that I'm hearing and what we try to do on the Locked On Kraken show is like, listen, when it comes to the hockey, we're going to break it down. We're going to keep it real, but we're still having fun.
That's great. And the geographics from the Kraken based on, I know there's a team in Vancouver not too far away, but when you think about the US and you think about the amount of cities that are not even 500 miles from Seattle, the geographics of, you're going to get people from Idaho, you're going to get people from Montana, you're going to get people from Portland, Oregon, maybe, to buy into this team, maybe, especially if they start winning. So the regional geographic side, even though a lot of the parts east are mostly land and not a lot of people, but still you can get some of that to grow into that region and support that team because you have the geographics there. So that is a big helper for the Kraken for sure.
Absolutely. And it has to be said that even outside of Seattle or even outside of Washington, the Pacific Northwest is a very distinct culture. And the Pacific Northwest knows hockey. While there hasn't been an NHL team or a team that's been eligible to compete for the Stanley Cup, since the Seattle Metropolitans, the Seattle Kraken inherit a lot of hockey history in the area. And so early on the Locked On Kraken show, we've been able to break some of that down, including the women's game. Like the Seattle Metropolitans, the owners of that team in the early 1900s put together a women's hockey league so that the wives of the Seattle Metropolitans could not only learn the game, but play the game. So that's kind of the history that the Seattle Kraken are embracing. And you move that to current, and, Ann and I have been talking a lot about sled hockey, and there's an adaptive hockey program for the Seattle Kraken, and that the Seattle Kraken are running, I should say, through their Kraken community Iceplex. And so it's just all of these different ways that there are different touch points to hockey loving people, all ages, all genders, all races, all abilities, and of course there's also the LGBTQIA league and things of that. So there's pride games and whatnot. So again, the franchise and the team, they go hand, and it's what's being done in the community to build community in the Pacific Northwest that makes it a little bit easier when the Seattle Kraken on the ice are not necessarily getting it done.
That's awesome, and happy for that community. So, what's next for the Seattle Kraken after this win against the Florida Panthers?
So up next, we have Nashville. Again, we were able to be successful early on in our very young inaugural season against Nashville and get that win on the road. So now they come to Climate Pledge Arena. The Seattle Kraken have been talking a lot about making it difficult for teams to play in CPA, Climate Pledge Arena. Again, that has not always been the case, and the Seattle Kraken are exercising some demons when it comes to how much they can protect their own home. But coming off of this win against Florida and knowing that they've been able to meet some success against Nashville, I think that hopefully that will build up some of the character that we want to see, some of that grit, some of that energy that the Seattle Kraken unfortunately often lack. I even joke around and say they should just, instead of doing like a light morning skate, they should skate a full, like at game pace period of hockey for the morning skate, so that maybe by the time we drop the puck at the evening time, they're already like have tricked their bodies into the fact that they've already played one period of hockey. Because that's how much of a slow start they are. But that's what we have coming up next. Obviously, we got, I guess, about a week ago, the new schedule, because there's no Olympic break for NHLers, even though Matty Beniers, our second draft pick, will be in Beijing. And so I'll be able to cover him there. But, that's what we have. That's what we have coming up. We're trying to, shake off that loss against St. Louis, take what we got against Florida and parlay that into success against Nashville. So, Armando, what about the Panthers? What do y'all have coming up here? I mean, as you mentioned, as we talked about, it's still a stellar season for this team. So now how do you bounce back?
I was thinking that the Panthers would probably get hopefully like maybe 7 or 8 points in this out of 10 in this road trip. Right now, they only have 4 out of their 8. So their next game's against Winnipeg, the last game of this 5-game road trip, and then they return home to face Vegas. No Jack Eichel still for Vegas, and then they welcome San Jose before back-to-back with Columbus and New York. But if you can get a win in Winnipeg and get 2 points, you solidify an over 500 road trip. And even though it wasn't pretty at points with Calgary and now Seattle, you'll get the over 500 part out of the way, and it'll be 2 straight road trips of being over 500, where the Florida Panthers have struggled to get some road wins this year. They're 21-3 at home, but the road record has just been kind of different for them. But that's what the Florida Panthers got coming up. So win in Winnipeg, and you'll end it on a positive note.
Love to hear it. Absolutely. Well, it's always a pleasure, Armando, to be on here with you. We're both repping our Caribbean heritage. You with the PR Boricua hat, which I am also, but I'm wearing the New York Cubans because I'm here in New York until I go to Beijing, and I'm a Cubana, so had to rep it when I saw what you were wearing. Actually, repping some Panthers colors here. I don't know how that worked out, but I've got my Kraken deep blue on too.
I mean, it's a good mix. The colors, the blue is kind of similar, so works out.
Indeed. Well, always a pleasure to have you on for a crossover. Wishing you and the Panthers the best of luck, especially now that you don't have to face us anymore for the season. So wishing
Gladly
you
so.
Yeah. Wishing you best of luck. I'm really excited, quite honestly, to see, to your point, what this Panthers team can do, given that they really got a good taste of what a postseason run can look like for them.
Absolutely. And I'm definitely looking forward to it.
It should be a good one. Well, until we squadcast again, always a pleasure. But for Armando Velez from Locked On Panthers, my name is Erica Lindsay Ayala, your host of Locked On Kraken. We thank you for making either Locked On Panthers or Locked On Kraken your first listen of the day. Now it's time for you to head over to Locked On Bets, where you can listen to your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. And just like all of our shows across the Locked On network, they are available free for you on your favorite podcast listening app or over on YouTube. But until tomorrow, we're signing out.